Imagine for a moment that you're standing on an ancient battlefield. The air is thick with tension. Thousands of soldiers stand at attention. And on both sides, generals are making calculations that will determine not just who wins or loses, but who lives and who dies. Now, imagine that one of those generals has something the other doesn't. A small collection of bamboo scrolls containing wisdom so powerful that it has shaped the course of empires for 2,500 years. Man, but here's the thing. That same wisdom isn't just for the battlefield. It's for the boardroom. It's for the job interview. It's for the difficult conversation you've been putting off. It's for every moment in your life where you face competition, conflict, or challenge. Welcome to Audiobook Insights. Today, we're diving deep into what is arguably the most influential strategy book ever written. A book that's shorter than most magazine articles but contains enough wisdom to last several lifetimes. A book that has been studied by Napoleon, MacArthur, and countless business leaders. A book that, despite being written over 2,000 years ago, feels like it was written for the challenges we face today. I'm talking, of course, about Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Now, you might be thinking, a book about war? In this economy? On this channel? But here's the paradox at the heart of this ancient text. It's not really about war at all, at least not in the way we usually think about it. Sun Tzu teaches us that the greatest victory is the one that never has to be fought. The highest skill is resolving conflict before it begins. The ultimate strategy is making your opponents your allies. This 2,500-year-old masterpiece, consisting of only around 6,000 words spread across 13 chapters, has become required reading everywhere from Wall Street trading floors to Silicon Valley startups, from NFL locker rooms to diplomatic negotiations. Why? Because beneath its surface of military terminology lies a profound guide to human nature, strategic thinking, and the art of getting what you want without destroying what you have. Over the course of our time together, we'll explore the life of the enigmatic Sun Tzu. We break down each of the 13 chapters in detail, extract the key insights that you can apply starting today, and understand why this slim volume continues to sell millions of copies year after year. Whether you're an entrepreneur facing fierce competition, a professional navigating office politics, a student preparing for life's challenges, or simply someone who wants to think more clearly and act more effectively, this book has something for you. So settle in, get comfortable, and prepare to discover why the art of war has remained an indispensable guide to strategy, leadership, and human conflict for over 2 millennia. Let's begin. About the book and author. Before we dive into the wisdom of the art of war, we need to understand the man behind it and the world that shaped his thinking. And right away, we run into our first mystery. Who was Sun Tzu? Sun Tzu, his name actually means Master Sun, is believed to have lived during the late spring and autumn period of Chinese history, roughly around 544 BCE to 496 BCE. This was a time of extraordinary intellectual ferment. In Greece, philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were laying the foundations of Western philosophy. In India, the Buddha was teaching his path to enlightenment. And in China, Confucius was spreading his teachings on ethics and social harmony. So it was as if humanity, all across the globe, was waking up to the power of systematic thought. But while Confucius was teaching about harmony, Sun Tzu was teaching about conflict, because China in this period was anything but harmonious. The spring and autumn period, and the subsequent warring states period that followed, was exactly what it sounds like. A time of almost constant warfare between competing states vying for control of China. It's estimated that during this era, in perhaps 110 separate states ceased to exist, swallowed up by more powerful neighbors. Sun Tzu was born into this world in the state of Qi, in what is now Shandong province, in eastern China. His family were minor aristocrats, which meant he had access to education and, crucially, to the military texts and historical records of previous campaigns. Young Sun Tzu was apparently obsessed with military strategy, devouring everything he could find about the great generals and battles of the past. The path to becoming a legend. According to traditional accounts, Sun Tzu spent much of his early adulthood in relative obscurity. He eventually left his home state of Qi and traveled to the kingdom of Wu in the south, where he lived as a recluse in the mountains near modern-day Suzhou. There, in relative isolation, he farmed the land and refined his strategic thinking, eventually compiling his ideas into the 13 chapters we now know as The Art of War. The book itself, The Art of War, consists of 13 chapters, each focusing on a different aspect of strategy and warfare. In its original form, it was written on bamboo strips that were bound together with silk cord, a physical format that encouraged brevity and conciseness. The language is poetic, elliptical, and often ambiguous, qualities that have allowed generations of readers to find new meanings in its lines. As one scholar notes, the text's enigmatic quality invites endless interpretation and application to new situations. The book's structure reflects Taoist philosophy, which was emerging in China during this same period. The emphasis on indirection, on the power of softness overcoming hardness, on working with the natural order of things rather than against it. All of these echo Taoist themes. The journey through history. From China, The Art of War spread throughout East Asia. It became required reading for military leaders in Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. The great unifier of Japan, Tokugawa Ieyasu, studied it deeply and required his generals to do the same. The book played a role in Japan's unification and in the subsequent centuries of peace under the Tokugawa shogunate. The first Western translation appeared in French in 1772, translated by a Jesuit missionary named Father Amiot. Napoleon supposedly studied it, though whether he actually applied its lessons is debatable. English readers had to wait until 1905, when a partial translation appeared. The first complete English translation, by British scholar Lionel Giles, was published in 1910 and remains one of the most widely read versions today. In the 20th century, The Art of War found new audiences. Military strategists studied it alongside Clausewitz and Jomini. Business leaders began applying its principles to competition in the marketplace. Sports coaches used it to motivate their teams. Negotiators found in it a guide to resolving conflicts without destructive confrontation. Today, The Art of War is available in dozens of languages and hundreds of editions. It's on the reading lists of MBA programs, military academies, and leadership seminars worldwide. It's quoted in boardrooms and locker rooms, so in political campaigns and diplomatic negotiations. Chapter by chapter summary. Now we're ready to dive into the 13 chapters themselves. Each chapter is short. Some are only a page or two in modern editions, but packed with wisdom. We'll go through them in order, exploring the key insights and how they build on each other. Chapter 1. Laying Plans. Sun Tzu opens with a statement of the stakes. The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, and a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. This sets the tone for everything that follows. This is serious business. Mistakes have consequences. Therefore, we must approach it with the gravity it deserves. Sun Tzu then introduces the 5 constant factors that must be considered in all strategic deliberations. First, the moral law. This refers to the alignment between the ruler and the people. Thus, when the people share the ruler's purpose, they will follow him regardless of personal danger. When there's a disconnect, when the people don't believe in the cause, no amount of technical skill can compensate. In modern terms, this is about organizational culture and shared purpose. Do your team members believe in what you're doing? Are they committed to the mission? Do they trust leadership? If not, you're starting at a disadvantage. Second, heaven. This refers to the natural world, night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. In ancient warfare, weather and timing could determine the outcome of battles. In modern terms, this is about external factors beyond your control, market conditions, technological change, social trends. Third, earth. This refers to physical terrain, distances, dangers, open ground, narrow passes, chances of life and death. In ancient times, this meant mountains and rivers and valleys. In modern terms, this is about your competitive landscape, market geography, regulatory environment, distribution channels. Fourth, the commander. This refers to the qualities of leadership: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. These are the personal attributes that enable a leader to make good decisions, inspire followers, maintain discipline, and take calculated risks. Fifth, method and discipline. This refers to organization, the marshalling of the army, gradations of rank, a maintenance of supply lines, control of expenditure. This is about systems, processes, and resources. These 5 factors are the framework for strategic analysis. By systematically evaluating each one, the general can understand his situation and make informed decisions. Sun Tzu then provides a set of 7 questions to guide this analysis. Which ruler has the moral advantage? Who has the stronger alignment with their people? Which general has greater ability? Pick who is the better leader. Which side has the advantages of heaven and earth? Who has the better timing and position? On which side is discipline more rigorously enforced? Who has better systems? Which army is stronger? Who has greater resources? Which has better trained officers and men? Who has greater capability? Which has more consistent rewards and punishments? Who has better incentives? By answering these questions honestly, then the general can forecast victory or defeat before the battle begins. If you're at a disadvantage on most factors, you need to reconsider your plans. If you have the advantage, you can proceed with confidence. The chapter concludes with the famous statement, "All warfare is based on deception." Sun Tzu then provides examples: when able to attack, seem unable; when near, seem far; offer baits to entice the enemy; feign disorder to trap them; attack where they're unprepared; appear where they least expect you. The key insight here is that information is power. What the enemy doesn't know can hurt them. By controlling what they know, you control their responses. Finally, Sun Tzu emphasizes the importance of calculation. The general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is fought. The general who loses makes but few calculations beforehand. Victory comes from preparation, not luck. Chapter 2. Waging War. If Chapter 1 is about strategy and planning, Chapter 2 is about logistics and economics. Sun Tzu drives home a crucial point. War is expensive, and its costs must be carefully managed. He opens with a detailed accounting of the costs of raising and maintaining an army. A force of 100,000 soldiers, with its chariots, supplies, and support personnel, costs 1,000 ounces of silver per day. This is an enormous drain on the state's resources. From this, Sun Tzu draws a crucial conclusion. Speed is essential. When you engage in actual fighting, if victory is long in coming, then men's weapons will grow dull and their ardor will be damped. If you lay siege to a town, you will exhaust your strength. Prolonged war has cascading effects. As resources are depleted, the state must impose heavier taxes, impoverishing the people. As the army is exhausted, other powers may take advantage. No man, however wise, will be able to avert the consequences that must ensue. Therefore, Sun Tzu argues, though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been seen associated with long delays. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. This doesn't mean rushing in unprepared. It means recognizing that time is a resource and that the costs of delay must be factored into any plan. Once committed, move decisively and quickly. Sun Tzu then offers practical advice on managing costs. Forage on the enemy whenever possible. Supplies taken from the enemy are worth 20 times what you can produce yourself, because you're not just gaining resources, but depriving the enemy of them. Treat captured soldiers well and incorporate them into your own forces. This is using the conquered foe to augment one's own strength. And the chapter ends by reiterating the stakes. The leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or in peril. Leadership is not a game. It's a profound responsibility. The modern application is clear. In business, in politics, in any competitive endeavor, you must understand the resource costs of your actions. Don't commit to long, drawn-out conflicts unless absolutely necessary. Look for ways to make your opponent's resources work for you. And remember, that time itself is a resource, one that can work for you or against you. Chapter 3. Attack by Stratagem. This chapter contains some of the most famous passages in the entire book. Sun Tzu begins by ranking forms of victory. The highest form is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. Destroying it is inferior. Better to capture an army entire than to destroy it. Better to capture a regiment, a company, and a unit than to destroy them. Then comes the immortal line. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. This is the core of Sun Tzu's philosophy. The goal's not to destroy your opponent, but to achieve your objectives. Destruction is wasteful. Fighting is costly. The best outcome is one where you get what you want without any destructive conflict at all. As Sun Tzu then outlines a hierarchy of strategic approaches. Balk the enemy's plans. The best approach is to prevent the enemy from even formulating a coherent strategy. Disrupt their planning, confuse their intentions, make them second-guess themselves, prevent the junction of enemy forces. If you can't disrupt their plans, prevent them from bringing their full strength to bear, divide and separate them, keep them from coordinating, attack the enemy's army in the field. And if you must fight, do it in open battle rather than laying siege. Besiege walled cities. This is the worst approach to be avoided if at all possible. Sieges are expensive, time-consuming, and unpredictable. The reason sieges are so bad, Sun Tzu explains, is that they require enormous preparation. 3 months to build siege engines, another 3 months to construct mounds against the walls. And then when the general loses patience and launches a direct assault, a third of his men may be killed while the city remains untaken. This is a vivid illustration of the costs of direct confrontation. When you attack a fortified position, you're playing to the defender's strengths. You're accepting the fight on their terms. No wonder it's the worst option. Sun Tzu then returns to the theme of victory without fighting. The skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them, and he overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. This is the ideal, to achieve complete victory with minimal cost. How is this possible? Through superior strategy, psychological pressure, and the manipulation of circumstances. Sun Tzu also provides practical guidance on force ratios. If you outnumber the enemy 10-1, surround them. If 5-1, attack them. If 2-1, divide your forces to create multiple threats. If equally matched, offer battle cautiously. If slightly inferior, avoid a decisive engagement. If completely outmatched, retreat. This is not cowardice, but wisdom. Fighting when you're outmatched is not courage. It's stupidity. The wise leader conserves strength for when it can be effective. The chapter also discusses the dangers of interference from above. As a ruler who doesn't understand military matters but tries to command the army can bring disaster. By ordering advances or retreats that don't make sense. By trying to govern the army as if it were a civil administration. By appointing officers without understanding their qualifications. Finally, Sun Tzu lists the 5 essentials for victory. Know when to fight and when not to fight. Know how to handle both superior and inferior forces. Have an army united in spirit across all ranks. Be prepared yourself while waiting for the enemy to be unprepared. Have military capacity and not be interfered with by the ruler. This chapter is the philosophical heart of the book. It teaches us that the best victory is the one that never happens. That strategy is superior to brute force, and that understanding the situation is more important than any fixed formula. Chapter 4. Tactical Dispositions. Chapter 4 shifts focus from strategy to tactics, from what to do to how to do it. Sun Tzu begins by drawing a crucial distinction between defense and offense. The good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat, and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy. This is a profound insight. The first priority is not to win, but to avoid losing. Secure your own position before trying to attack the enemy's. Make yourself invulnerable first, then look for openings. Sun Tzu explains, to secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. You can control your own preparedness, but you can't control when the enemy makes a mistake. Therefore, focus first on what you can control, your own position. The good fighter is able to secure himself against defeat, but cannot make certain of defeating the enemy. Victory depends on the enemy's errors. If the enemy makes no mistakes, you may not be able to defeat them. But if you've secured yourself against defeat, you haven't lost anything. This leads to a key principle. Standing on the defensive indicates insufficient strength. Attacking, a superabundance of strength. Defense is what you do when you're weaker. Offense is what you do when you're stronger. But Sun Tzu doesn't mean this as a moral judgment. Defense is not bad and offense good. They're simply appropriate responses to different situations. When you're weak, defend. When you're strong, attack. The mistake is to attack when you're weak or defend when you're strong. Sun Tzu then introduces the idea of secret tactical dispositions. The truly skillful general makes his preparations so subtly that no one can see them. His plans are invisible, his dispositions unknowable. Thus, he seems to win effortlessly. The chapter concludes, "To see victory only when it is within the ken of the common herd is not the acme of excellence. Neither is it the acme of excellence if you fight and conquer, and the whole empire says, 'Well done.' To lift an autumn hair is no sign of great strength. To see the sun and moon is no sign of sharp sight. To hear the noise of thunder is no sign of a quick ear." In other words, true excellence is invisible. The great general wins in such a way that his victory seems inevitable, natural, even easy. No one sees the years of preparation, the careful positioning, the strategic patience that made it possible. They just see the result. This chapter teaches us the importance of focusing on our own position first. Before worrying about beating the competition, make sure you're secure. Before trying to attack, ensure you're defended. The foundation of all success is not being defeated. That's Chapter 5. Energy. Chapter 5 is about momentum, creativity, and the management of forces. Sun Tzu uses the metaphor of energy, the power that comes from proper organization and timing. He begins, "The control of a large force is the same principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers. Whether you command 10 men or 10,000, the principles are the same. It's about organization and communication. So the key is to create a structure where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Individual soldiers may be ordinary, but when organized properly, they become something extraordinary." Sun Tzu uses striking metaphors. The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent, which will even roll stones along in its course. The quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. The energy of a torrent comes from its volume and speed. The energy of a falcon comes from its precision and timing. Similarly, the skillful general creates energy through proper positioning and timing. Then comes the famous comparison. The energy of troops may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of a trigger. This is a crucial distinction. Energy is potential, the bent bow, the stored force. Decision is actual, the released trigger. The applied force. The general must know how to build potential energy and then how to release it at exactly the right moment. Sun Tzu emphasizes the importance of deception in creating energy. By presenting false appearances, by feigning disorder, by creating confusion, the general can shape the enemy's perceptions and responses. To ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken. This is effected by maneuvers, direct and indirect. Direct and indirect, these are key concepts. The direct is what the enemy sees. The indirect is what they don't see. By combining the two, the general creates infinite possibilities. There are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combinations of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. There are not more than 5 primary colors, yet in combination they produce more hues than can ever be seen. Similarly, there are only a few basic tactical maneuvers, but in combination they produce infinite possibilities. The skillful general is creative, finding new combinations for each situation. This chapter teaches us the importance of momentum and timing. Success comes not just from having resources, but from organizing them effectively and releasing them at the right moment. And it comes from creativity, from finding new combinations, new approaches, new ways of doing things. Chapter 6. Weak Points and Strong. Chapter 6 is one of the most practical in the book. It's about identifying and exploiting the enemy's weaknesses while protecting your own. Sun Tzu begins, "Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field and has to hasten to battle will arrive exhausted." The first mover has the advantage of choosing the ground and preparing. But this doesn't mean always being first. And it means controlling the timing and location of engagement. The clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. You want to fight on your terms, not theirs. How do you impose your will? By offering advantages that the enemy cannot resist, by creating threats that the enemy must respond to, by controlling the rhythm of conflict. Sun Tzu introduces the concept of emptiness and fullness, weakness and strength. By holding out advantages to him, he can cause the enemy to approach of his own accord. Or, by inflicting damage, he can make it impossible for the enemy to draw near. The key is to discover the enemy's emptiness while concealing your own. If I am able to determine the enemy's dispositions while at the same time I conceal my own, then I can concentrate and he must divide. And if I concentrate while he divides, I can use my entire strength to attack a fraction of his. This is the principle of concentration of force. By making the enemy spread their forces, you create local superiority, even if you're outnumbered overall. You attack 10 with 100 by ensuring that the 10 are isolated. Sun Tzu emphasizes the importance of secrecy and unpredictability. In making tactical dispositions, the highest pitch you can attain is to conceal them. Conceal your dispositions, and you will be safe from the prying of the subtlest spies, from the machinations of the wisest brains. When your plans are invisible, the enemy cannot prepare for them. When your movements are unpredictable, the enemy cannot counter them. Then comes the famous passage, "All men can see the tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances." This is crucial. That people can see what you did, but they can't see why you did it. And because circumstances change, you must not repeat the same tactics. What worked yesterday may not work today. Adapt. The chapter concludes with the water metaphor. Military tactics are like unto water, for water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. This is a powerful image. Water doesn't fight obstacles, it flows around them. It finds the path of least resistance. It adapts to whatever container it's in. The skillful strategist does the same, adapting to circumstances, avoiding strengths, attacking weaknesses, never becoming rigid or fixed. Chapter 7. Maneuvering. Chapter 7 deals with the practical challenges of moving armies and engaging the enemy. Sun Tzu is realistic about the difficulties. There is nothing more difficult than the art of maneuvering. What is difficult about it is to turn the devious into the direct and misfortune into gain. Maneuvering is hard because it involves trade-offs. The direct route may be obvious to the enemy and easily defended. The devious route may be longer but less expected. The challenge is to turn that devious route into an advantage, to make the longer path actually serve your purposes better than the direct one. Sun Tzu warns of the dangers of maneuvering with large forces. To maneuver an army is advantageous, with an undisciplined multitude, most dangerous. If you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are that you will be too late. If you march without equipment, you will lose your baggage. This is the dilemma of speed versus preparedness. Move too fast and you leave your supplies behind. Move too slow and you miss the opportunity. The skillful general finds the balance. Sun Tzu then discusses the challenges of engaging the enemy. We cannot enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors. Know who you're dealing with before making commitments. He also emphasizes the importance of psychological factors. We shall be unable to turn natural advantages to account unless we make use of local guides. You need people who know the terrain. The chapter contains practical advice on reading the enemy's signals. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, and he is relying on the natural strength of his position. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. By observing the enemy's behavior, you can infer their intentions. Are they confident or afraid? Prepared or desperate? United or divided? Sun Tzu also discusses the importance of morale. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. When troops are too tired to seize opportunities, it's a sign they need rest. This chapter teaches us that maneuvering is an art, not a science. It requires judgment, timing, and the ability to read situations and people. There are no formulas, only principles to be applied with wisdom. Chapter 8, Variation in Tactics. Chapter 8 is about flexibility and adaptation. Sun Tzu emphasizes that generals must be prepared to vary their tactics according to circumstances. He begins by outlining different types of ground and appropriate responses. In some situations, you should not encamp. In others, you should not linger. In still others, you should press on. But the key is variation. The general must not be bound by fixed rules, but must adapt to the specific situation. What worked in one battle may not work in the next. But what works against one enemy may fail against another. Sun Tzu warns of 5 dangerous faults that can affect a general. Recklessness, which leads to destruction. The reckless general charges in without thinking, exposing his forces to unnecessary risk. Cowardice, which leads to capture. The cowardly general hesitates when he should act, missing opportunities and allowing the enemy to seize the initiative. A hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. The hot-tempered general can be goaded into making foolish decisions by enemies who know how to push his buttons. A delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. The general who cares too much about reputation can be manipulated through threats to his honor. Over-solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and exhaustion. The general who tries to protect his men from every hardship may end up exhausting himself and compromising the mission. But these 5 faults are the bane of a general's military career. They represent the psychological vulnerabilities that can undermine even the best strategy. The implication is clear. Self-knowledge is essential. The general must understand his own tendencies and guard against them. He must know where he's vulnerable to manipulation and protect those vulnerabilities. This chapter also emphasizes the importance of thinking ahead. The general must consider not just the immediate situation, but the second and third order consequences of his action. What looks like an advantage now may become a disadvantage later. What seems like a loss now may lead to victory tomorrow. The modern application is obvious. In any competitive situation, we must be aware of our own psychological vulnerabilities. What pushes our buttons? What makes us react emotionally rather than strategically? How can we guard against manipulation? And how can we stay flexible, adapting our approach as circumstances change? Chapter 9. The Army on the March. Chapter 9 focuses on the practicalities of moving and positioning troops. Sun Tzu provides detailed advice on reading the terrain and the enemy. He discusses how to position troops in different types of ground. When crossing mountains, stay close to valleys. When encamping in valleys, choose high ground facing the sun. When near rivers, stay away from the water. But these are specific ancient examples, but the principle is general. Understand the terrain and position yourself advantageously. The chapter also contains extensive guidance on reading enemy behavior. When the enemy's soldiers talk among themselves and their officers keep repeating orders, they're losing confidence. When the enemy is suddenly friendly, they have ulterior motives. When the enemy's horses are fed grain instead of grass, they're preparing for action. And when the enemy's officers are angry and restless, they're exhausted. When the enemy hangs their cooking pots on the wall and doesn't return to camp, they're desperate. By observing these signals, the general can infer the enemy's condition and intentions. This is intelligence gathering through direct observation. Sun Tzu also discusses how to maintain discipline in the army. When troops are treated with humanity but not given clear orders, they become spoiled and useless. When they are driven harshly without human consideration, they become resentful. The wise leader balances humanity and discipline, treating soldiers well, but maintaining clear standards. This chapter teaches us the importance of observation and interpretation. The world is full of signals. The question is whether we're paying attention and whether we can interpret what we see correctly. And it teaches us about leadership, the balance between caring for people and maintaining standards. Chapter 10. Terrain. Chapter 10 returns to the theme of terrain, but now with more detail and with a focus on the relationship between ground and leadership. Sun Tzu identifies 6 types of terrain. Accessible ground, where both sides can move freely. Entangling ground, where it's easy to enter but hard to exit. Temporizing ground, where position is equally disadvantageous to both sides. Narrow passes, where the ground constricts movement. Precipitous heights, where elevation provides advantage. Positions at a great distance, where distance separates the forces. Each type of terrain requires different tactics. In accessible ground, maneuver carefully. In entangling ground, don't get trapped. In narrow passes, seize control early. On heights, hold the high ground. But terrain is not just physical. Sun Tzu also discusses the terrain of leadership and organization. He identifies 6 ways that defeat can occur. Flight, when the army runs away without fighting. Insubordination, when officers disobey orders. Collapse, when the army falls apart under pressure. Ruin, when the commander loses control. Disorganization, when units become confused. Rout, when the army flees in panic. These failures are not caused by the enemy, but by the commander's own mistakes. These 6 are the principles of defeat. They must be carefully noted by the general who has responsibility for his men's lives and the safety of his state. The chapter emphasizes the general's responsibility. He must know the terrain, know his troops, know himself. If you know the enemy and know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt. If you know heaven and know earth, you may make your victory complete. This chapter reinforces the theme that victory depends on comprehensive knowledge of the physical environment, of human nature, of organizational dynamics. And it emphasizes that failures are often self-inflicted, arising from the leader's own mistakes rather than the enemy's strengths. Chapter 11. The 9 situations. Chapter 11 is the longest in the book, dealing with the different situations an army may encounter and how to respond to each. Sun Tzu identifies 9 types of ground. Dispersive ground, when troops are fighting in their own territory, near their homes, and in this situation, and they may be tempted to desert if things go badly. Facile ground, when you've penetrated just a little way into enemy territory. Here, you're not yet committed, and troops may be easily discouraged. Contentious ground, ground that offers advantage to whichever side occupies it. Both sides will want to control it. Open ground, where both sides can move freely. Here, position is less important than maneuver. Ground of intersecting highways, key transportation nodes that connect multiple areas. Whoever controls these controls movement. Serious ground, when you've penetrated deep into enemy territory. Here, you're committed and troops will fight desperately. Difficult ground, mountains, forests, marshes, terrain that's hard to move through. Hemmed-in ground, where access is narrow and exit is winding. Small forces can block larger ones here. A desperate ground, where you can only survive by fighting desperately. In this situation, troops will fight with suicidal courage. Each type of ground requires a different approach. In dispersive ground, unite the troops' will. In facile ground, keep them together. In contentious ground, attack from the rear. In open ground, pay attention to defense. In ground of intersecting highways, form alliances. In serious ground, gather supplies. In difficult ground, press on quickly. But in hemmed-in ground, use strategy. In desperate ground, fight. Sun Tzu emphasizes that the skillful general can turn even desperate situations to advantage by understanding psychology. Throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve. Officers and men alike will put forth their uttermost strength. This is the principle of fighting spirit. When people have no choice but to succeed, they often find resources they didn't know they had. But this must be used carefully, not recklessly. The chapter also discusses the importance of secrecy and surprise. The good general must be skilled in the art of making no mistakes. His victories are not due to luck, but to his ability to put himself in positions where defeat is impossible. This chapter is a masterclass in situational awareness. And the same army with the same soldiers will behave differently in different situations. The general must understand how context shapes behavior and adapt accordingly. Chapter 12. The Attack by Fire. Chapter 12 focuses on a specific weapon, fire, but the principles apply more broadly. Sun Tzu discusses 5 methods of attacking with fire: burning personnel, supplies, equipment, arsenals, and transport. He gives practical advice on timing. Fire attacks should be launched when the weather is suitable, when the wind is right, when the season is dry, and he emphasizes the importance of follow-through. After starting a fire, be ready to exploit the confusion it creates, but the deeper message is about using the environment as a weapon. Fire is a natural force that can be harnessed for strategic purposes. Similarly, water, weather, terrain, all can be used to advantage by the creative general. The chapter ends with a reflection on leadership and emotion. The enlightened ruler lays his plans well ahead. The good general cultivates his resources. Move not unless you see an advantage. Use not your troops unless there is something to be gained. Fight not unless the position is critical. No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique. And this is a crucial warning against emotional decision-making. War is too serious for anger or pride. Every action must be calculated for advantage. If it is to your advantage, make a forward move. If not, stay where you are. Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by content. But a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never come again into being, nor can the dead ever be brought back to life. The costs of war are irreversible. Once you've destroyed something, you can't undestroy it. Once people are dead, they can't be brought back. Therefore, the leader must act with wisdom, not emotion. Chapter 13. The Use of Spies. The final chapter deals with intelligence, the foundation of all strategy. Sun Tzu begins by emphasizing its importance. What enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge. Foreknowledge cannot be gotten from ghosts or spirits, from omens or divination. It must be gotten from people, from those who know the enemy's situation. Sun Tzu identifies 5 types of spies. Local spies, recruited from the enemy's population. These are ordinary people who can provide information about local conditions. Inward spies, recruited from the enemy's officials. These are people with access to decision-makers and internal information. Converted spies, enemy spies who have been turned to work for you. And these are especially valuable because they can feed false information to the enemy while providing true information to you. Doomed spies, agents sent to deliberately spread false information, knowing they may be caught and executed. Their sacrifice serves to deceive the enemy. Surviving spies, agents who gather information and return safely. These are your professional intelligence operatives. Each type serves a different purpose, and all must work together. When these 5 kinds of spy are all at work, none can discover the secret system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads. It is the sovereign's most precious faculty. Sun Tzu emphasizes that spies must be treated well, housed, fed, and rewarded generously, and their work must be kept absolutely secret. Of all those in the army close to the commander, none is more intimate than the spy. Of all rewards, none more liberal than those given to spies. Of all matters, none is more confidential than those relating to spy operations. The chapter concludes by tying intelligence back to the theme of knowledge. It is only the enlightened ruler and the wise general who will use the highest intelligence of the army for purposes of spying, and thereby they achieve great results. Spies are a most important element in war, because on them depends an army's ability to move. Without intelligence, strategy is blind. With good intelligence, the general can see clearly and act effectively. Conclusion. As we come to the end of our journey through the art of war, let's step back and consider what we've learned. We've explored a book written 2,500 years ago by a Chinese general who understood that the highest skill is not fighting but thinking, not destroying but achieving. We've worked through 13 chapters covering everything from planning to espionage, from terrain to leadership. We've extracted key insights about knowledge, deception, preparation, speed, flexibility, and the costs of conflict. But what does it all mean for you, sitting here today, listening to this summary? It means that the next time you face a challenge, whether it's a difficult conversation, a competitive situation, a personal struggle, you have a framework for thinking about it. You can ask yourself, what would it look like to resolve this without fighting? Is there a way to achieve my objectives while minimizing conflict? Do I really know myself in this situation? My strengths, my weaknesses, my tendencies, my blind spots? Do I really know the other side, their motivations, their constraints, their fears, their hopes? What information do I have and what do I need? How can I get it? Am I preparing adequately or am I rushing in without thinking? Once I'm ready, am I moving with appropriate speed or am I delaying unnecessarily? And am I being flexible, adapting to circumstances, or am I stuck in rigid thinking? Am I focusing on the enemy's weaknesses, or am I banging my head against their strengths? Am I leading myself and others wisely, or am I falling into the faults Sun Tzu warns against? Have I considered the full costs of this conflict, including the hidden and long-term costs? These questions, derived from Sun Tzu's ancient wisdom, can guide you through almost any challenging situation. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: the greatest victories are invisible. The best outcomes are those that never become conflicts at all. The highest skill is achieving your objectives while preserving relationships, resources, and peace. This doesn't mean avoiding all confrontation or never standing up for what matters. It means being strategic about when and how you engage. It means understanding that destruction is always a cost, even when it's justified. And it means seeking resolution rather than victory, understanding rather than conquest. Sun Tzu wrote for generals facing life and death decisions on ancient battlefields. But his wisdom transcends that context because human nature hasn't changed. We still face conflicts, still compete for resources, still struggle to achieve our goals in a world full of others doing the same. The specific circumstances may be different, but the underlying dynamics remain the same. That's why the art of war continues to be read, studied, and applied 2.5 millennia after it was written. That's why CEOs read it alongside quarterly reports, why coaches share it with their teams, why negotiators keep it on their shelves. It speaks to something fundamental about the human experience, the challenge of achieving our purposes in a world of competing purposes. As you go forward from here, I encourage you to keep Sun Tzu's wisdom in mind, not as a rigid set of rules to be followed literally, but as a lens through which to see situations more clearly, not as a manual for manipulation, but as a guide to strategic thinking, not as a justification for conflict, but as a path to resolution. The art of war, properly understood, is really the art of peace, the art of achieving our objectives without unnecessary destruction, the art of understanding ourselves and others deeply enough to find common ground, the art of thinking clearly and acting wisely in a complex world, and that is an art worth studying, no matter who you are or what battles you face. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Sun Tzu's The Art of War here on Audiobook Insights. I hope this summary has given you a deeper appreciation for this ancient masterpiece, and more importantly, provided you with practical wisdom you can apply in your own life. If you enjoyed this summary, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you in-depth explorations of the world's most important books. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. How do you think Sun Tzu's principles apply to modern life? Have you used any of these insights in your own challenges? What other books would you like us to cover? Until next time, remember, the greatest victory is the one that never has to be fought. Think strategically, act wisely, and seek resolution over destruction. This is Audiobook Insights, signing off.